less than 15 miles from this spot. My grandfather actually lived in Forestville. So if any of you are that familiar with Bristol, will know where that is. They originally met in this community and were later married. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for their union together. Years later, the youngest daughter, Erwin's and my Aunt Libby, lived in the community of Wallingford. A few decades later, Richard and his family established their roots in Glastonbury. I am a novice student of genealogy. It's a subject of one's ancestral heritage. Our family history is interrelated to the events and cultures of human civilizations throughout time. It gives one a sense of involvement and participation in these events for a particular period. Further, it gives us a sense of personal meaning within a larger society. Recently, current events in history collided with our family genealogy. Nowhere is it more evident than the past several days. In 2007, Richard actually visited my house and stayed overnight because Erwin was on his vacation for a few days. We talked about a number of things, but the one thing he was plugging at that time to me was his book, which is an extraordinary read. His foreword says the following: "To Karen, my source of encouragement and inspiration for the past years, and devoted, sensitive, and loving mother." On October 13th, at 7:29 p.m. Eastern Time, I got a message on Facebook from Karen. "Stephen, I just got home from the hospital. Richard is very critical. We're praying for a positive outcome. It is surreal. It's us, not somebody on the TV. I'll write more tomorrow when we see how he gets through the night." I won't go into the detail. It's been done. "We are praying for a positive outcome. I and Manya come home to get a few hours sleep, and Micah is sleeping in the hospital. Could you please tell the Faulks for me?" The Faulks are mutual cousins in New Jersey. I have no idea to get in touch with them. Like, we now know through social media how to get in touch with them. Could you please tell them I have no idea how to get in touch with them. Erwin knows, of course. And then she had the wherewithal to say to us, "Regards to Linda." Linda's my wife. "Love, Karen." On the 19th of October, I sent her a message. "Our thoughts are with you. Stay the course." On October 27th, I wrote her the draft of what I'm saying tonight. "Dear Karen, I'm addressing this post to you. You know how I have the highest regard for you ever since you dated Richard. I am writing this as a memorial tribute being held Sunday in West Hartford with the help of Rabbi Plavin at the Solomon Schechter School. I wanted you to read this first. It's not just a courtesy, but an act of love for you, Richard, and the Larkin family. You know that someone is loved when their passing draws not only the usual sadness, but actual grief, and that is what we are experiencing right now. On the Facebook page for the past 2 weeks, I've been posting pictures of the New England foliage and reminiscing about a number of family relatives. I have been engaged in this activity with my cousin Erwin. For the past several days, we've been holding an international vigil over Richard's well-being. Any of my personal concerns pale in comparison to the recent events that have occurred in Israel with my cousin and others. I am writing this as a tribute to him, and I titled it, "The Remembrance of One of the Greatest Mentions I have Ever Known." Richard, his brother Erwin, and their parents, Harry and Ethel Larkin, originally lived in Brookline. There, they lived together with my uncle's sister, Ann, and their family of winers. They moved on from that location and lived in the area of Oak Hill in Newton years later. Richard was older than I by about 9 years. Since I lived on a farm with my parents and grandparents, Richard and his family would visit us often. I have the recollection that Richard was treated as royalty, just like his father, Harry Larkin, on the farm, particularly by our grandparents. My brother disagrees. My brother is developmentally challenged. My brother says, Richard helped Grandpa. He let the chickens out of the shelters and brood houses, graded the eggs, and went with Dad, my father, Isaac, in the hen coops, plus fed the chickens scratch feed. All I remember was his mother, Ethel, yelling to him, take off your good shoes. I believe this experience helped him when he and his family stayed on a kibbutz in Israel. When he was in high school, he used to produce and direct puppet shows with marionettes. Marionettes are just a wonderful puppet item. Somebody hasn't seen them, or they're in museums, but Richard worked with them. Richard put a lot of passion and hard work into these productions. We used to love attending those puppet shows. Rich and I do share a few things. For example, we individually attended a number of colleges to help determine our respective careers. My wife and Richard went to the same high school in Newton. We also share one school in common, Boston University. And there he met his future bride, Karen. And the story was my mother and my mother's family friend, Ruth Aframe, helped lean on him to get together with Karen at the school. And as Erwin has mentioned, one of their activities was going down to the south with the Boston University students and the Freedom Riders. I'd like to make a couple comments about Richard's parents. For several years, my Aunt Ethel and my Uncle Harry hosted Thanksgiving meals with a number of relatives from both sides of the family. This included Passover meals as well. Sometimes it even included the Makatonim and other people. My aunt was a nurse who worked in area hospitals and helped those that were sick. My Uncle Harry was actively involved in raising money for Israel through Israeli bond drives. He was involved with the conservative Judaism movement as president of his temple in the Newton Brookline area. In that role, he was also the regional national officer of the conservative Judaism movement. My Uncle Harry was also instrumental in the Solomon Schechter School movement locally and nationally. Richard and Karen walked the walk with the passion for the Solomon Schechter School. Our presence today is a fitting tribute to the Larkin family in that regard. In addition, I'd like to say the feeling of Zionism not only emanated from my uncle and his son Richard and his family, but had its roots in Eastern Europe. Our great-grandfather was a resident of the shtetl Motala in today's Belarus. This is the ancestral home of Chaim Weitzman. If our family is not directly related, I believe our ancestors were close neighbors of the Weitzmans. When Chaim Weitzman was experimenting with chemicals in his home, my great-aunt remembered the event. There have been several incidences of Richard's kindness towards his relatives. As the older sibling, Erwin knows that he took care of him in the camp. More recently, a small birthday party was held for my brother at Erwin's house. Richard called from Israel and wished my brother a happy birthday. You have to understand, this meant a lot to my brother, who at times is frozen in the 1950s and 1960s time period. When my father was dying in 1981, he came to the hospital. He was able to converse with my dad before my father went into his comatose state. My father was engaged at the time and enjoyed hearing from Richard. Most importantly, if I had to describe Richard in just one word, it would be mensch. Mensch is a Yiddish word. It means a man of integrity. Richard has been a mensch. I can count the number of mensches on my fingers and toes. Richard may have been the most significant of all of them, with the possible exception of my own parents. To me, a mensch consists of three major components. 1, family. 2, faith. 3, community. As a leader, Richard set an example for others to try to emulate. To be a mensch not only comes from within, but also comes from the positive influences of family and others. Throughout his life, he could continue to accomplish good deeds for others. Some people are blessed with fame and fortune. Our family has been blessed with several mentions, and Richard perhaps was the greatest of them all. As I mentioned earlier, I come from a farm. It's a small farm in central Massachusetts, about 20 miles from Worcester. And I happen to live near a Trappist monastery. I believe the monks had a calling. Richard had a leader. One particular monk, Father Richard, used to communicate with my grandfather on a regular basis. I also like to note, when Richard moved to Israel with his wife and his kids, Richard has spun the good feelings, caring, and kindness to relatives, friends, and others on 2 continents throughout the years. Having written this in private to Karen, she sent me back her comments. Dear Stephen, thank you, thank you. I don't need to be thanked. I'm laughing and crying at the same time. You captured the family and described Richard the mensch, the little boy who went into the chicken coops with his new shoes, the puppeteer, the man who never stopped caring about his family, his community, and in fact the whole world, and was never scared, embarrassed, shy, or deterred from thoughts and acts to make him even better. Not better in material things, but better in kindness, responsibility, humanity. My imaginary conversation with Cousin Richard. Richard, I've been reading Ralph Waldo Emerson, and in one of his selected writings he stated the purpose of life is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. And I said to Richard, how can I save the world if I cannot even save my own family? My cousin Stephen, you do it one person at a time and patiently. It will be a reward well worth taking. I would like to end this with perhaps a selection from Karen and Richard's favorite poem from Robert Frost, which I added a few lines to. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. We need to help continue Richard's and Karen's quest. All of us need to pass life's test. And we have miles to go before we sleep. And we have miles to go before we sleep.
We gather today as a strong and united community who have joined together to honor Richard Larkin and all of the other victims who recently died in Israel as a result of indiscriminate violence. The following are among those who lost their lives. We honor their memory today by lighting a candle for each of them. Eric Zaks will call upon a member of our community to come up, and I will read the name of the person whose memory we are honoring. May their memories forever be a blessing, and may their families and the entire family of Israel be comforted during this time.
Larkin family, please. All of them.
Richard Larkin, age 76, died in Jerusalem on October 27, 2015.
Alan Hillman, the president of JFAN.
Avraham Asher Hasno, age 54, died near Hebron, October 20th, 2015.
Sidney Perry, the president of the Jewish Federation of New Haven.
Heftom Zahum, 29, died in Beersheba,